You're awake right now. You're not dead, and you haven't gone to hell, said Rachel Maddow, the former host on CNN following the 2016 election. Ladies and gentlemen, people get very angry about politics. President Donald Trump had similar words following the 2020 election. Quote, "You're not going to have a country anymore." Unquote. Late night host Jimmy Kimmel cried on stage following the 2024 election. Quote, "It was a terrible night for women and for children, for democracy and decency." Unquote. Here, Rachel Maddow, Donald Trump, and Jimmy Kimmel all made sensational claims. But they didn't make these claims in order to solve a problem. Instead, they wanted to create drama, and they achieved it by displaying shock and anger into the cameras. This is called false outrage. And even though false outrage is designed for the cameras, it influences others. Actually, it doesn't just influence them. It infects them. False outrage is a disease. And to cure this disease, we must decide that anger is not the solution to our problems. Today, we'll start by diagnosing this disease in our culture, move on to its symptoms, and conclude with a cure. If our culture could walk into a doctor's office, it would come away with a severe diagnosis of false outrage. So, what's the difference between true and false outrage? True outrage wants what is right. It only cares about achieving good. False outrage wants to be seen. An excellent example is in George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, where the communist regime mandates a daily practice known as the 2 minutes of hate. Every day, the citizens of the regime gather in front of their TVs and scream in pure outrage as images of their capitalist enemies flicker by on the screen. Their anger doesn't accomplish anything. They only perform. And false outrage, just like that, is all over the internet today. As Killian McLaughlin and her colleagues found in an article for Science magazine, quote, "Social media posts that express outrage are liked and shared more, training users to express more outrage, and ranking algorithms to amplify it," unquote. For example, Benny Johnson, a conservative podcaster, uses false outrage to attract views. Nearly all of his videos feature AI-generated images of angry or screaming politicians. In one, for example, an AI-generated image of Donald Trump wearing Eskimo clothing screams, along with Vladimir Putin. That doesn't make any sense. But Benny Johnson has 15 million followers. Unfortunately, false outrage isn't just spreading online. It's also spreading in the real world. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression points this out. Quote, "This year, 68% of college students said that shouting down a speaker is at least rarely acceptable," unquote. The report noted that 68% is a record high. More students than ever before are willing to use outrage to silence conversation. This happens all around us. 3 years ago, my grandparents and I went to the March for Life in Washington, D.C. When the march ended, I decided to keep my poster as a souvenir. That was a mistake. A woman saw my poster, walked over to me, and began screaming at me, telling me I never should have participated in the march. She didn't even know me, but this moment stuck with me because it shows just how quick to anger so many people in our culture are today. Now that we've diagnosed our culture with false outrage, let's move on to its symptoms, the actual effects of a false outrage. False outrage causes us to have angry conversations, and to believe that our anger makes us good people. As writers for The Minimalist, a blog that encourages simple living, point out, quote, "We've all gotten offended without asking ourselves why, and then use our fake outrage to cast judgment upon others. It helps us feel better. And pretending to be outraged is easier than attempting to breach the walls of introspection. We've all pretended. Writers for the Minimalist point this out. Writers for the Minimalist, a blog that encourages simple living, point this out. Quote, we've all gotten offended without asking ourselves why, and then used our fake outrage to cast judgment upon others. It helps us feel better, and pretending to be outraged is easier than attempting to breach the walls of introspection. Unquote. When we pretend to be angry, we don't have to reason through our own beliefs. Piers Morgan, the British host of a political show with 4 million followers, uses false outrage to avoid hard questions. In a 2017 interview, after a guest questioned Piers' stance on gun policy, Piers responded, quote, "How dare you?" His face tightening for the camera. His guest responded, "Well, Piers, you can keep saying that, but my point still stands." But Piers didn't address his point. "Again, how dare you?" Piers repeated. But nothing Piers Morgan said advanced the debate. Instead, he used his outrage to shield himself. Because outrage is easier than analysis. False outrage is like hiding under the bed during a game of hide and seek. It might hide you well, but it's a terrible place to be. False outrage is a terrible place to be. And humans practice it because it makes us feel like better people. Psychologist Joshua Grubbs found in a 2019 report that public figures express outrage in order to receive applause from their audience, and a term he calls moral grandstanding. When public figures condemn some far-off event, they receive praise for their bravery, courage. Stephen Colbert, another late-night host, has done exactly that. After Donald Trump held a rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City, Colbert said on his show, quote, "I'm sure it's just a coincidence. But in 1939, they held a pro-Nazi rally there." Unquote. With this remark, Stephen Colbert insinuated that Donald Trump is pro-Nazi, having created a straw man out of Trump, an evil Nazi. Colbert spared no words, swearing at Trump live on national television. His statements make sense within a worldview that treats outrage as virtuous. Author Glenn Beck describes the human effect of false outrage in his book, Addicted to Outrage. Quote, "It deprives human beings of genuine humanity, replacing it instead with an outwardly facing caricature of a virtuous human being wrapped around a rotting corpse." Unquote. This worldview has morality backwards. It replaces good deeds with outraged words. Culture celebrates false outrage. Politicians and media figures promote it. They don't deserve all the blame, but their worldview does deserve the blame. Their worldview is false. Fake outrage is not a virtue, and moral grandstanding is not a good deed. This moral confusion has eroded the genuine compassion of millions and transformed it into outrage. But I wouldn't have accomplished anything if I told you to be outraged at false outrage. That would be a terrible cure to this disease. I used to be addicted to outrage. I was angry at every news story. I debated every little detail. Thankfully, I was convicted after reading Glenn Beck's book, Addicted to Outrage. I realized what I had been doing. Colossians 3 verse 2 says, quote, "Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things." I made a pledge to stop being outraged at earthly things. Imagine if everyone stopped practicing false outrage. If we stopped being so angry all the time, calmly discussed difficult questions, and stopped believing that our outrage makes us good people. That's the world I want to live in. And that world is only possible if you help build it. To take a quote from Darth Vader in Star Wars completely out of context, quote, "With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy." Unquote. We've diagnosed our culture with false outrage, discussed its symptoms, and seen the cure. You won't make the world a better place by being angry. You make the world a better place when you focus on something higher than the next controversy. You have a whole life to live. Don't waste it being angry.